In business and economy, and of course I heard development, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is the Director General and Chairman of the World Trade Organization, has said that world trade will be affected by negotiations and geopolitical tensions. It's going to affect trade. It's going to pose some form of challenges to the trade relationships between Nigeria and the United States, between the United States and Mexico, China, Canada, you just name it, between the BRICS countries and the European bloc. We're not unaware why that is going to happen, because the newly sworn-in president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, has, issued out executive actions, policies that will affect these countries. It only goes to show that the United States of America is a power bloc and could turn things around by making one statement and the world will face another direction. The president of the United States can make one statement and it will affect the the stock exchange. It could affect the stock exchange not just in the United States, in the world and in other countries. And this is what we will be dealing with today. So, because it's coming from Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, a lady, we're going to be starting with blessing on this matter. Your auntie.
Oh yes, my big auntie.
said it's going to be, world trade is going to be affected by this geopolitical tension. And I tell you, sometimes I just want to imagine, let's assume there's not going to be geopolitical tension. If oil is going to go back, probably maybe below $600 or $60 and not 81 or 75 or 76 as it is at the moment, and how it's going to affect Nigeria, how it's going to affect, she mentioned the Ukraine and the Russian war, she mentioned Israel, Palestine with Hamas. Where are we going? Do you share a perspective?
Well, I share that perspective because it's a growing concern. The concern keeps growing with the dimension that these geopolitical tensions assume each day. Now, it was at a certain level in 2024, and it has escalated to another level in 2025 with Donald Trump becoming the United States 47th president and the executive orders and directives that he gave on the first day of assuming office as president of the US. So, and there have been reactions, though those reactions are yet to grow or become policies, but countries like China, countries like Mexico and Canada have spoken about retaliating against the tariff that Trump has imposed on them. That's one. Now, this geopolitical tensions escalated for the first time to a certain level after so many years when the Russia-Ukraine war started. Before then, there have been trade wars between US and China, but it wasn't at the level that it became one you would find a physical war. So it was just a thing of tariff. US imposes tariff on China, China reciprocates, and then they make one policy, China retaliates. That had been it. And that had been it too for some other countries. Except for the Middle East, where we knew that there was always this tension between Israel, Palestine, and even those within Hamas and all, but it was not a full-blown war as we're beginning to see today. But once the Russia and Ukraine war started, and then we saw how there was this rallying behind the two countries, we saw how there was obvious factionalization, and so it was easy to say, oh, this is an ally of this country, this is an ally of the others. We saw Europe rallying behind Ukraine and providing support, and we saw China and some other country rallying behind Russia. So it became obvious where everybody allied to, or who they were forming alliance with. That too affected trade. And at that time, the World Trade Organization Director General, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, was even warning. But we saw the effect of that in the disruption of supply chain, in food scarcity, in the increase in price of commodities globally. And then with this new imposition of tariff by the U.S., under the decision to protect U.S. and U.S. to be for U.S., the MAGA, you know, make America great again, the MAGA concept. And we're going to see more of that, because if Canada, China, and Mexico live up to their words and come up with retaliatory policies, of course, it will further fragmentize or lead to fragmentation of the world. We're also seeing economic blocs form and also making a decision and move against the economy of other countries. Now, you may not say that is exactly what it is. Maybe my words maybe sound so tough, but that's what it is. The BRICS nation, the de-dollarization move, it is targeted or is going to affect the American economy, because they are targeting the dollar, which is one of the strong reasons why the American economy is as solid as it is. So they want to provide an alternative to the dollar. If that succeeds, they've been triers. And if that succeeds, it also means that the reliance on the dollar as the universal currency for trade will change. That also too would affect the value of the dollar, and it will also affect the U.S. economy. Now, to make sure that doesn't happen, U.S. too is buffering and coming up with certain moves to ensure it doesn't happen. Recall that Donald Trump has said if they think U.S. will stand idle and watch for that to happen, then they're joking. So these issues playing at the same time is resulting in a huge threat to global trade. Because if it escalates more than this, it then means that certain changes will be made to trade agreements. We will not see that cooperation that the world is looking for. Changes will happen to bilateral relations, and it will result in supply chain disruptions. And when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffer. So who are the grasses that will suffer here? It's countries that are dependent on these powerful nations for services, for products that will suffer. So they too might want to start looking for ways to protect themselves, make up policies, and begin to produce certain goods that they rely heavily on for some other nations to provide for them. So at the end of the day, we're not seeing global cooperation, we're seeing global fragmentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I remember vividly the point you just raised, where President Donald Trump was saying that he's going to give the BRICS nations some form of breather, some form of respite, if they do not carry out their threat by replacing by bringing up another currency to replace the dollar, then they're not going to trade with the dollar, that they shouldn't even think of that. So let's assume, Doctor, let me just assume you are President Donald Trump, or let me call you Dr. Trump Idahosa.
No. I don't need
let me just assume that you are the United States president.
You could call him, you could call him, you could call him an admirer of President Trump.
I'm trying to see the way the United States is going to wiggle out, negotiate its way using bilateral negotiation, or how to outfox the BRICS nations and other countries out of this quagmire. It seems more like a dilemma. Do you see them coming out unscathed?
Well, senior mentors in international relations have expressed their fear about what they feel a Donald Trump disruption will cause to the international space or community. But I'm completely very different about those worries, because I'm finding an environment today really where we're going to have a more equitable world, where people have to take responsibilities for their lives. Yesterday, I was so enthused to hear Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa speaking out and say, Donald Trump, take your America. South Africa does not belong to you. We will govern our own South Africa the way we want it. You can do with America the way you want. And I think that for me is an opportunity. I'm not saying, sure, that globalism has actually helped Africa, unfortunately. So Africa must begin to find his feet and identity, taking advantage of this offering that Donald Trump is presenting to the world. So that if Americans need me, I will charge them premium. If I need them, they can charge me premium. And then it will just be sweet for everybody. Because what globalization has done, just referring to Jenkins' work, globalization and its content, is that some certain part of the world are empowered and now taking decision for the majority of the rest part of the world in terms of trade. Look at the volume of trade imbalance. WHO has never been able to balance that. Has always skewed to the West. So I think that this affords us opportunity, like China did some years ago under Chairman Mao Zedong, to face off their country for a period of 30 years. The war did not sink. There was no World War fought. But it brought about a more resilient, a more united China. They took advantage of that exclusion for that 30-year period to even evolve a new language to make China more uniform. So I don't think people should be afraid about the death of globalism, or what some people attack the World Federation. I don't think it's one world government that solves our problem. What will solve the global problem is a president that are elected to govern their nations should take the responsibility of building the lives of their people, taking advantage of what nature has provided for them. And then we can then compete without anybody putting limitations on what we can do. So Africa can decide to say, well, this is what we have. We have to be more united among ourselves, foster bond of brotherhood because of the proximity of our environment. And I think that is what is going to happen. And I'm not sure that it's going to seriously distort, like people have said, that of course world trade will be distorted. I don't think so. Because what is happening here is negotiation at its best. I've said it from day one. Donald Trump was inaugurated, that Donald Trump is a negotiator. He's not just a disruptor, he's a negotiator. And all he's doing is that he's trying to present a posture to the world that makes America look as the most important country to the world. And if you need us, you need to play to our terms. Okay. But I think that nations are waking up to those responsibilities so that the skewness in the international order can be addressed.
Well, America was seen as the police of the world. And when it comes, of course, every other part of the world, tends to shiver to know what's happening. For Canada, I think Canada equally wants to show that, look, we are a sovereign country, we are a sovereign nation.
And they're powerful too.
Yeah, yes, so you can't just threaten us, notwithstanding the fact that we're just 40 million people here. And it will look like a defeat if they don't speak for themselves. Given the relationship that the European Union, the United States of America, Canada, the relationship that exists with these three people, or these three blocks, I've not even envisaged that they might have a fractured relationship. I think they are all just playing to the gallery, or try to bring Mr. President Donald Trump to a place whereby, look, Yes, this is what you're saying, but you know at the long run, this is not what's going to happen.
Yeah, but look at the
For China,
against Canada.
Yes.
What did he say? I love the people of Canada, but I don't like their leadership.
Okay.
So which means issues really is not about
business and trade.
It's not about
it's
whether
ideological.
he has a problem with a particular place. It's actually looking at the way the world is currently wired. Blessing said just now, the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's actually not war between Russia and Ukraine. It's war between NATO and Ukraine and Russia. So it is not about Ukraine. It's actually about NATO, which is, of course, again, a global institution. And where is this money derived from? The money, America is funding it, hugely. And Donald Trump is saying, I won't fund that war. I won't fund it. So these are the things that we're going to begin to see. And it's not a myth.
I think you're almost getting to where
the last 4 years
yeah.
that Donald Trump had to be in America, on the forefront of America, America was only one war front, and that was in Afghanistan, and it was working hard to pull them out. America didn't enter into any war, and they didn't fight anybody. And that is also what we're going to expect and see, that Donald Trump is saying, you are not going to use American resources to create and destabilize the globe. Let American fund what is happening itself and let the world take care of itself. He said this when he appeared in 2017 at the United Nations, and he said, I am elected to govern America, and I think all of you are elected to govern your country. You govern your country so I can govern my own country. This is where we are. So we cannot be saying, oh, in the name of coming together, and then of course we are pulling resources to sell people's arm or whatever technology they need to sell.
Okay, so let's assume the United States, President Donald Trump, for lack of a better word, is working against the administration or the person of Mr. Justin Trudeau to leave because of his policies that are contrary to the ideology of the Republican government.
Contrary to common sense.
Let's look at it from that, and then let us equally look at that part of American president that is concerned about the Russian-Ukraine war, or like you call it, the Russian-NATO war, that, look, I am not going to give my resources to you anymore. And it looks as if it's a resource war. Do you not think it's a negotiation? Now, I need Blessing to actually come in here because I'm just consider my question a rhetoric. Do you not think that little by little, Trump is indirectly doing the bidding of Mr. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia? Now, look, if I don't sponsor NATO, the war between you and Ukraine will die a natural death.
I don't think that Trump is doing the bidding of Putin or doing the bidding of anybody. Because let's even use his personality as an example. Trump is not one who can be a stooge. He's not one who can be a figurehead. That's aside. Now, look at the war between Russia and Ukraine, or as Doc says, Russia and NATO. It was unnecessary. But NATO and Ukraine, with their move, forced the hand of Russia. Take it back some years ago, when that situation almost happened between Russia and America over Cuba. But Russia retreated when America said, no, this can't happen. You can't cite your military, you can't have your military arsenal at our backyard because of how close geographically Cuba is to America. Russia retreated. So when Russia raised the same concern with NATO's presence and Ukraine joining NATO, why did NATO back out? Now, even if Ukraine and Russia had some frosty relationship, even though they used to be same country under the USSR, I think it would have been left for Russia and Ukraine to handle their issues, for the fact that NATO knew very well that any acceptance of Ukraine into NATO, there would be a conflict or an escalated conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Then they should not even have come into play. Even right now, Ukraine's position in NATO has not even been ratified. So it's more like the main reason you wanted to become part of this association, organization, you have not even gotten it, but there's a war already. And there have been support from US under the guise of aid to Ukraine. There have been support of Europe to Ukraine under the guise of aid to Ukraine. But Russia is left behind. And Russia is seen as the offender here because it is said Russia invaded Ukraine. But what led to that invasion? Now, Donald Trump doesn't believe in the narrative that is being put forward that Russia is the offender here. And so he does not want to put US money in causes that he doesn't believe. So it's a matter of, I am the leader of this country. There are certain principles I believe in. There are certain ideologies I believe in, and that he thinks make sense. So he's aligning the US with principles he believes in and he thinks are just. And when the US was the father of everybody, police of the world, did it really work out well for the world?
I think they're still doing it.
No. If Donald Trump goes with what he wants to do, given his executive orders and directives and going with what he plans to do, America will be taking their hands off a lot of things that shouldn't necessarily be their business.
Okay.
Because in places where America has been involved as the peacekeeper, have there really been peace, really, in those places? Let's look at what happened in Libya. Let's look at what happened in Afghanistan and in several other areas where we've had the UN peacekeeping mission. If those peacekeeping missions were to be investigated...
Iran and Kuwait, they were in there, they brought about peace.
Oh, really? So at what cost?
Oh, yes, because Iran wanted to take over Kuwait.
At the cost of civilization.
No, at what cost? So really, Donald Trump knows that certain causes that the US and the UN have been pushing, really, they didn't need to. And some of them have outlived their relevance. So it's time for them to focus. They can focus on their country. But what I'm more concerned about is how they go about focusing on their country. Now, this tariff plans that he plans to, this tariff that he plans to impose on other countries, yes, it's a way of backing to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And so other countries are looking, well, can we afford for him to do this? Is there a way to force the hand of the US at this time? So it's going to be what I see happening for global trade. It's going to be a power play. Who has the better advantage winning it all or winning most part of it? So if Doc is saying that there's going to be equity, I don't think there's going to be equity. I think what is just going to happen, we're going to see more power play. And every country doing an assessment to say, evaluating what are our strengths, what can we play at, what can we push forward, how much advantage do we have. So it's going to be an advantage game. Now, if you do not ensure that you're building advantage in some areas, you are going to be on the receiving end.
Great. Doc, now, Doc, I need you to address this. The United States was known for not just policing the world. Economically, they came to power during the Second World War. The First World War, they were not known anywhere because they were still operating the protectionism policy that made them stay back. And other players were at the forefront of the game, and they really had it. Donald Trump's disposition could be taking the United States back to that prism where the World Trade Organization, the United States can lose control over it.
Yeah.
It can lose control over NATO. It can lose control over the economic relations and over the economic godfather role it plays by giving aid to other countries that made other countries depend on them and to be loyal to the United States of America. Now, Madam Ngozi is saying it's going to bring geopolitical tension. If the United States completely withdraws, it looks like Russia and China is pushing out. That's like an opposite. Where will it take the United States to the disadvantage?
No, I don't think so. And I'm not assuring anyone that America is going to pull out of its influence globally. But I think what is important, and I think that's what we all have to understand. Take, for example, when Donald Trump came, he spoke about issues in the Middle East. And one of the crises that he found that is in the Middle East is the issue of injustice. Before Donald Trump came, there was a huge and massive anti-Semitic protests among young Americans who were made to believe that, for example, Israel was the aggressor. And what did the president say? He says, if there was no October 14, October 7, there wouldn't have been any form of aggression. So how do you deal with the aggression in the Middle East without addressing the issue of October 7? Unprovoked attack. This are the thing creating tension in the world. That you have regimes who are funding pockets of insurgents, pockets of criminality all around the globe. That's actually creating the tensions. And he's saying, I'm not going to be involved in that. I want a world that is peaceful, where nations can talk to themselves and agree without necessarily getting into war. He has said, if I were in power, the Russia war would not happen. Even the adoption that happened on October 7 would not have happened. So you're finding a world that is in a state of inequity, because some people are pushing some certain form of agenda of political correctness against the other kind of human beings. And he is not just speaking to politicians, even including religion. Recently he said about Pope, and he said, oh, Pope, consider that I'm not a Christian. I'm a Christian and I'm proud about it. And I will not be a president of America and Christians are humiliated. It will not happen. So what he's saying is that we cannot assume or pretend to see the injustices that is happening all across the globe, and then in the name of political correctness, everyone is trying to play the game of being popular. He has chosen himself to be unpopular. If he's going to withdraw in what is happening, we don't have to be talking about the last season in South Africa that the main media are not talking about, which is also an issue of injustice. So he sees what is happening globally. He wants to trade globally, but he is saying that how can we reduce costs? In short, Dodge, which of course Elon Musk is hoping to cut from American daily spending about $4.5 billion daily to reduce the burden which America is carrying. America is the greatest debtor in the world as we speak. And how can you have that humongous debt on your shoulder and you are still acquiring more? And I think a sensible regime must be thinking about how to go down on this indebtedness. The printing of dollars that have depreciated the dollar and its value. That people are not hedging against dollar anymore. That people are now starting to hedge against gold. Now, so these are the challenge that face the president of America. And this is the issue he needs to deal with. Not what necessarily is happening to the world. I'm not sure that it's a kind of a repeat of the Monroe Doctrine, but I think it's the fact that you have a world that is equitable, where people do what they are supposed to do, and America is not overstepping its bound, and it's also playing within the bigger picture of creating an atmosphere at home where its citizens are not hungry, its citizens are not having neglect in terms of infrastructure. Some roads in America for past 30 years have not been maintained, and new ones are not built. So these are challenges that the American itself faces. So you have to pay attention to your home condition before you begin to determine what happened elsewhere in the world.
And just to add, I think Nigeria should borrow relief from Donald Trump, because Nigeria have been playing big brother to Africa for a very long time. But what has Nigeria gotten from the younger ones that it has been playing big brother to, giving support to some African countries where Nigeria needs support, even military support, even having Nigerian soldiers fight for other African countries as in peacekeeping missions and all. So I think Nigeria needs to learn from what Donald Trump is doing by preferring America first, protecting America first, and doing what is right for America and by Africans. And I've said this on this table. It is time for Nigeria to revisit trade agreements, bilateral relations that it has with other countries. And where our foreign policies are against us or don't favor us, then they should be reworked.
All right. And lastly, within this conversation, some of the utterances of President Donald Trump seem to be taking effect.
Oh, yes.
Because
you heard that, Kenya.
What do they want?
What do they want?
Yes. Why are they leaving?
Why are they leaving?
Why are they leaving the World Health Organization?
Oh,
why?
If you remember, in 2020, the COVID year, Kenya was doing well in terms of managing their COVID before the World Health Organization disrupted the whole conversation, that there were local solutions, and those local solutions seems to be rubbished by the position of the WTO, WHO. So you find that nations are beginning to sit down to actually consider some of these pronouncements, and that is why I always want to push that conspiracy theory that whatever the West is pushing to us, in the name of these institutions, that emerged after the victory of the Second World War, we have to be very cautious.
We are the one benefiting the most health-wise from the WHO, the African.
You know
that talk about, for example, vaccinations that is making Kenyans not productive by research, because the content of those vaccinations that WHO brought to Kenya is actually destroying the reproductive health of Kenyans. Now, if you also remember that it's only recently that people have been pushing in the northern part of Nigeria to accept vaccine because of its perception.
Yes.
So, you see, there are some certain things that people are pushing that we have to be wary of, that they seem to be for your interest. We need to look with a binocular lens, whether they're actually for our interest or they are meant to serve certain interests, which may not really be good for us, but only good for the others.
You know, that one thing that some of us or some part of the world are still missing is the role of US and the influence of US. You can't undermine the influence of the US. So, WHO, some countries have had one or two issues to think about the way the organization has been running, particularly with the COVID-19 era and the way they dispensed their policies and the vaccines and some other things that happened. But you know, when someone who you place in high repute comes up to speak about a thing that you've had concern for, and it aligns with your thoughts, it aligns with your reasoning, you now have more reason to dig deeper into that thing and like, aha, I said it before, I thought about it, let's take a look at this. Do we really need to be part of this organization? Do we need to conform to their rules, to their policies? And that's what happened. You know, the other day when we talked about the US withdrawing, that it might result in other countries now scrutinizing WHO more and assessing their membership of the WHO, and then coming to a decision whether or not to remain with WHO. So the US is still a big player. The influence of the US cannot be undermined.
Thank you very much, Blessing. And for me, Kenya, I was thinking probably you would have left before the United States actually leave. However, for Nigeria, I would say, please don't leave. Stay there, continue to get the aids, and make sure you open your eyes to look at every vaccine and every goodies that is coming from the WHO, so that we are able to manage whatever perception we already have about them.